Hey everybody, it's Candy, aka Brown Eyed Girl 69. How y'all doing this evening? Well, today is May 29th of 2026. It's actually the 149th day of year one, just an FYI. A few days ago, I don't know how long it's been, I made a video on homelessness, and I kind of wanted to pick up on that subject matter. Um, I have a lot of things I can cover and about being homeless. One thing that I did realize about the last video that I made was about resources. I didn't talk a lot about, I talked a little bit and, talked a little bit about how people are treated, um, where are the people supposed to go, what do people expect. I always hear people say, "Oh, just get a job." Well, for one, when you're homeless, um, you don't have an address unless you have a resource or a place that is going to give you that resource of having an address. Um, a lot of homeless people, just because of their situation that they're in, they've lost their ID, they've lost their social security card, they don't have their birth certificate, whatever. It is hard nowadays to get the proper identification that's required to get them to get employment, unless you're lucky enough to find someone that's willing to pay you cash manual labor, you know, day labor places, whatever. You still have to have some sort of ID. Resource places. When me and Daryl first started out, which was in May of 2013, we had moved up there in February of 2012. And from February of 2012 until June of 2012, we lived in a very, very nice home in Broomfield, Colorado. It was Daryl's friend's home, and he basically told us that we could pay so much a month to live there. But after our arrival, we were then informed that the rent was going to be twice the amount that he quoted us. He said that the amount that he quoted us was just our getting in the door amount. So we were scrambling to find jobs, and nothing was coming available. And then we got into another situation where we ended up moving in with this crazy lady and her boyfriend and their dog. And it was me, Daryl, and our dog. Then once we got out of that situation, I think we was only there like 3 weeks, 3 or 4 weeks, not even that. Um, had another friend that I had already previously known that lived pretty close by. They said Daryl and I could come stay with him and his family and live down in their basement. And this friend of ours had owned his own company, and he hired Daryl for the summer of 2012. So by fall of 2012, Daryl and I was able to get into our own apartment. Problem was, our friend that had employed Daryl throughout the summer was not continuing to employ him after we got out of his place. So we quickly figured out the only reason why he even hired Daryl in the first place was so we could get out, you know, as quickly as possible. But anyway, so after we both were trying to get jobs and whatnot, and I was lucky to get a temporary job here and there, but nothing permanent. Nothing permanent that was guaranteed, you know. And our rent back at the time, back in that that time frame. For Denver, it seemed high at the time, but now in comparison, all these years later, like what, 13 years later, the rent is skyrocketed. Daryl and I was living in a little one-bedroom apartment on the south side of Denver, right on the edge of Aurora, and I guess that would be the Hamden area is where we were. Um, I think we were paying like $600 a month in 2012 into 2013. Anyways, make a long story short on this video, we went homeless in May of, oh, let's see, we lost our apartment. Basically, we couch surfed and house hopped for about 3 months. But it seemed like everybody that said they were willing to help us, once we got there, Daryl and I, we would get out and scan and scour the streets, and we had an address so we could, put in applications in the area that we were in. Nothing just ever came to fruition, and the people weren't patient enough to allow it to come to fruition. And after 2 or 3 weeks, they'd all be like, well, y'all got to go. We can't handle this, blah, blah, blah. Whatever excuse it was just to get us out of their house. And so we eventually hit the skids into Denver of 2013, May of 2013. And we were in Denver basically until July of 2013. Then we went up to Boulder, and we were in Boulder mid-July, all of August, and basically all of September. I think it was basically close to the end of September. And then we left there and went to Vegas, and we was in Vegas for 11 days when Daryl's cousin Happy took us off the street. When we were in Vegas, Daryl had a harp. He had a guitar, but electric guitars were not allowed to be played out on the street, even if you had your own ampage and didn't have to plug in anywhere else. Um, it wasn't allowed. We were even told by a cop in was it Tucson or Phoenix? It was in the Phoenix area. That was noise pollution. And right after he told us it was noise pollution, a loud Harley Davidson motorcycle rolled by. It was so loud you couldn't even hear yourself talk to the officer. But yet, what Daryl was doing was noise pollution, but the dude rolling down the street wasn't. Stuff like that. So he played a harp. He had his harmonica, and he played that out on the strip in Vegas. And we made pretty good money, and not enough to like get a place to live or anything, but for being on the streets, it covered what we needed. And we had people that would throw food down to us too, especially if they came out of PF Chang's or one of the restaurants there inside one of the casinos there, buffets, whatever, and they had plenty of food left over. They'd hand us what we called white boxes. So we were always, it seemed like we were always blessed no matter where we were. But yeah, his cousin pulled us off the street, treated us like a king and queen for about 3 days, and gave us enough funds, bought us each a ticket to Tucson, Arizona, which was our next stop, and gave us a little bit of spending money on the way in our pocket, and we were good to go. Made it to Tucson. A friend of ours that we had met in Boulder a few months prior was there with some other friends of hers that owned some property, and they had a couple RVs that weren't really in working order to drive, but they were still livable in that. And they had a main house that had plumbing, even though the RVs didn't have plumbing. So we stayed on their property for a while, but Daryl and I was looking for something better, looking for jobs. And there was a guy that Daryl happened to run across that needed a guitarist. And his name was Wade, and he was a drummer, and he had a band, and he had gigs, and he paid money. And so that was like exactly what we was looking for. Turns out this guy had a 1-bedroom apartment for other reasons that I won't go into, but he was able to let me and Daryl stay there. His daughter was not yet 18. She was in a situation where she wasn't going to be out until she was 18. And the apartment was basically for her when she got out. So we was only there for a short period of time. In December 2013, we decided to take off and come back to Oklahoma, hitchhike back to Oklahoma for Christmas. And again, we were totally blessed with a long haul ride from Tucson to Dallas. I then had a friend of mine in Dallas take me and Daryl to Gainesville. And then my cousin that lived in Ardmore came and picked me and Daryl up in Gainesville and brought us back up here to Purcell. And that was all just from May of 2013 to December of 2013. All these things that we experienced. And then my cousin let us stay with her for I guess we were there about 3 weeks. And she helped us out. I had a friend in San Antonio, Texas that said, hey, you can come stay with us. I can get Daryl work because he owned his own little business. So we're like, okay, cool. So we went down there. And as always, everybody that invites us to come into their home winds up kicking us out in a short period of time. For whatever reasons. Usually because Daryl and I reflect back to them their own. Well, this guy, turns out he did heroin on the DL. And Daryl's like, no, we're out of here. I'm not going to work for a heroin addict. Even though he did actually pay Daryl what he owed him. As soon as Daryl got that money, we were gone. And again, we were homeless on the streets of San Antonio, Texas. We were in San Antonio, Texas from January 2014 until August of 2014. In that time frame, we only slept on the streets a few nights. And then we went to the shelter there. And we lived at this shelter for 8 months. We did everything we could. I got involved in a program through the shelter to try to sustain housing for Daryl and I. And I was jumping through hoops. I was doing everything they asked me to do. But that apartment never came to fruition. So Daryl and I up and moved on. And we went to Austin. I'd met this girl through some other social media group on Facebook. And we met up with her, hung out with her and her dog for a week. And then we all decided that we wanted to go to Taos. And she had a friend in Taos that had land out way past by the earthships and stuff that's out there in New Mexico. And I don't know. It just seems like every place we went, if I was to actually look back on it all, was guided, in some shape, form, or fashion. It was like we knew what we needed, so we created what we needed to ahead of time for the experience to happen. We didn't stay in Taos very long, and we left. Me and Daryl, our friend that we went up there with, wound up staying up there for a while with her friend that we stayed with. We actually got to live in a hippie bus for about 10 days while we were there in Taos. But it was starting to get cold. Fall was starting to set in. We decided we wanted to get out there and try to get to warmer weather. And so we set our sights on San Diego. We left house on, I think it was September 9th. No, wait. Yeah, no, September 16th. And by September 21st, we were right there on the border of Arizona and New Mexico. And that photo of that last video that I spoke about on homelessness. And we got picked up shortly after that, like the next day, and was taken to Phoenix. We couldn't hitchhike out of Phoenix like we thought we could, so we got stuck there for like 3.5 weeks. But the guy that ended up taking us to Phoenix ended up basically sending us the money to get us a bus ticket from Phoenix to San Diego. Because he truly is the one that detoured us, because we just wanted him to drop us off in Flagstaff. But we had built up such a good rapport with him in the drive. He's like, hey, I can get y'all a room in Phoenix. I can, help you out, whatever. And he did. Um, he didn't think we were going to have a hard time getting out of Phoenix either, or getting a ride to, San Diego or anything. But we eventually got to San Diego in October of 2014. And that's where I talk about resources. Because when we were living in the shelter situation, the resources, we had a place to sleep. We didn't have to sleep on the street. We had a shower. We had a place to store our items so we could move freely about the city and try to do what we needed to do to better ourselves, however that was going to be. In some cities, the only reason why we had that opportunity in San Antonio is because of the way it was set up, even though nothing still came to fruition for us. But when we moved to other locations, like when we got to San Diego, we were in the actual city. And the first night, Daryl and I slept in Balboa Park. And right next door was the San Diego Zoo. And we heard lions roaring throughout the middle of the night. And it was close to Halloween time. They had another portion of the park where they were setting up a haunted house. Uh, we woke up the next morning and pretty much decided right then, right there, that we didn't want to stay in the actual city of San Diego. So we went to Ocean Beach, California, which was just 6 to 9 miles away, I think. So we went there and decided to see what the beach life was all about. Um, their resources were pretty good. They had a couple churches that threw weekly feeds to feed all the homeless people and all the lower income people, because everybody that went to these feeds wasn't necessarily homeless. They might have lived in their vans or were just low income and living on disability or whatever, whatever their situation was. They also threw gatherings, for the holidays, and there were people out there on the streets giving out coats, giving out gloves, hats, socks, uh, things that you needed. There were people that would provide a weekly lunch out by the beach, and sometimes a dinner. It just depended. Food was pretty abundant there. You weren't going to starve there, And word got around pretty fast in the homeless community. And the thing about the homeless communities is all the homeless pretty much gather in the same spots: parks, libraries, uh, alleyways, church steps. Um, yeah, so that's just the way it was. Ocean Beach had a Wednesday night farmers market. Daryl tried to play his guitar out there, but like I said, little amps aren't allowed. If he had had an acoustic, he could have gotten away with it. and he could have probably made some pretty good money. Um, we weren't all about flying sign. Um, because of the fact that I seen that as a form of begging, and I didn't want to just sit there with a sign on some street corner somewhere asking for a handout, you know? And Daryl didn't either. So that's why we try to utilize what we had on our person and our ability to make money, however that was. And it wasn't like we were just looking to make money so we could wash our clothes. We were looking to make money so we could eat. We were looking to make money so we could have our tobacco, and that's pretty much it. Yeah, we got food stamps, and we did have weekly feeds that fed us hot meals on occasion, whatever. But we still wanted to have a hot meal on occasion without, that food stamps wouldn't cover. There was this little place called Little China, I think, or something. I can't remember the name of it, but it's right there on Newport Avenue there in Ocean Beach. And it's still in operation to this day. And, oh, man, they had the best Chinese food. You could get a big old thing of fried rice with a main entree. And back then, it was like, man, pretty cheap. And they had all sorts of selections. They had like sweet and sour chicken, orange chicken, um, beef and broccoli, mugu gai pan, chicken chop mein, lo mein. Just, it was so good. They had crab rangoon, egg rolls, just your typical Chinese food. And it was amazing. It tasted wonderful. The people that ran that place were like genuine folk, and they treated everybody the same. They didn't care if you were homeless or not. If you were coming in and paying for your food, they were going to treat you like the customer that you were. Um, so yeah, that was a good little place to eat at on occasion. Daryl did give this guy that we had met off the streets, his daughter, keyboard lessons in the park once a week. He'd give Daryl, I don't know what it was, $25, $30 or something for an hour lesson. Sometimes he'd give him like $40 because he knew we needed the money. I will say this about beach towns is the resources of showers. You don't have to worry about not getting a shower um, because they have surfer showers. There in Ocean Beach, there was two places to take a shower. One was by the lifeguard tower, and one was over in Dog Beach area. Um, the showers were outside, um, surrounded by a brick wall. They had a little place where you could lay your stuff. Either up on the brick wall, they had these like little round table things where you could set your stuff that wasn't going to get sprayed with the water or whatever. The bathrooms were just like right behind the showers for the men and the women's. Showers were only cold water because they were intended basically for surfers and other beachgoers to rinse off the sand and salt water, whatever. Some surfers even rinsed off their boards there. But anyway, because of the fact that it was so open, you had to be clothed if you wanted a shower, but that didn't bother me. So basically, I would get in a tank top and I had these shorts that were like swim shorts, and they were made of the material that dried really quick. And so I put them on, and that's all I have on. And then I had my shampoo and my soap, and I would get my hair wet and shampoo my head and get my body wet. It was cold, but it was refreshing. It would snap me back to life. So Daryl, when we lived there in Ocean Beach, he pretty much took a shower every day. Me, I didn't want to take a shower every day simply because it seemed like it was just so. For Daryl, it was a little easier because he could stand there in his underwear or his swimsuit and pretty much bingo bango do what he needed to do, have his comb, have his towel dry off and go hang out on the park bench. Me, I had to get clothes wet, try to bathe myself underneath clothes, all that, and then go into the bathroom, take off the wet clothes, dry off, put on new fresh clothes. So it was a little bit more of an ordeal for me. But I still showered pretty frequently. But just I didn't do it every day like he did. He usually used the time that when I was up at the library on the computer for 2 or 3 hours, he usually used that time is when he would usually go shower and just go hang out. Shoot, I only got 5 minutes left. Well, that's okay because it's quick enough for me to end this story here in the next couple minutes. So we were in Ocean Beach from October of 2014 until February of 2015. February 2015, we decided we wanted to move north. We'd heard a lot about Venice Beach, so we decided that's where we wanted to go. So we was able to figure out how to get up there. We had the money. We figured out how to utilize buses up to Oceanside, and we had bus passes. And then we was able to get from Oceanside to LA on a train on a Sunday for like $20. $10 for me and Daryl to get there on a Sunday. I think it was a Sunday. Saturday night or Sunday. I think it was Sunday. Anyway, we get to LA. We decide to get on one of the trains and we go to Hollywood. Then we left Hollywood and went to Culver City, and we slept for the night out in front of their thing, a little building, abandoned building that was for lease. And the next day we got up and walked to Venice Beach. We basically stayed in Venice Beach for 1 week. Resources was pretty good, but to get to those resources, the distance to get to each place that offered a different resource was a major walk. And when you're carrying all your personal effects on you, walking takes a lot of extra time and a lot of extra energy. So we left there very quickly and decided to go back to Ocean Beach. That's the first time we ever turned back to go to a place that we'd left. So we went back to Ocean Beach, and I think I'm going to stop it there. And on the next video, I'll tell you what happened from that point on. Till the next time, peace, love, hugs, and nugs.